My son-in-law, Kevin, sat me down at Thanksgiving last year and said, "Bob, we need to talk about your money." He had this look on his face like he was about to tell me I had 6 months to live. He's an accountant. He's been worried about me since I retired, which was 19 years ago. He pulled out his phone and showed me some chart about how retirees run out of money, and he said, "Have you looked at your 401k lately?" I said, "Yeah, I look at it every quarter." He said, "And?" I told him it was at about $446,000. He paused. Then he said, "That's more than you started with." I said, "Yeah, I know." I retired from Donnelly Printing in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in March of 2007. I was 65. I'd worked there for 34 years, starting on the warehouse floor pulling pallets, and eventually moving into facilities maintenance. I fixed things: presses, HVAC systems, dock doors, whatever broke. My highest salary was around $52,000. Not bad for Lancaster, not great either. When I walked out the door, my 401k had $412,000 in it. I'd been contributing since 1987, the year the company started offering it. 20 years of putting in 8% of every paycheck, plus a 3% company match. All of it in an S&P 500 index fund, because a guy named Dale in the break room told me in 1987 that it was the only one worth picking. Dale didn't explain why. He just said, "Pick that one and forget about it." I did. Here's where the story gets interesting. I retired in March 2007. By October 2007, the stock market hit its peak. Then it started falling. By March 2009, the S&P 500 had dropped roughly 57% from that peak. My $412,000 was down to about $196,000. I'd also been pulling out $1,350 a month to live on, so between the withdrawals and the crash, I'd lost more than half my retirement savings in less than 2 years. My wife June was terrified. I won't pretend otherwise. We were sitting in the kitchen one morning and she had the statement on the table, and she said, "What are we going to do?" I didn't have a good answer. I just said, "We're going to keep doing what we're doing." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. My brother-in-law Frank called me that week. Frank had retired from the school district 2 years before me, with about $380,000. He'd moved everything into a money market fund the month Lehman Brothers collapsed. He told me I was crazy for staying in stocks. He said, "You're going to lose everything." I told him I was pulling out $1,350 a month, and the rest was staying where it was. He called me stubborn. He was right about that part. Here's what actually happened. The market bottomed in March 2009. By early 2013, the S&P 500 was back to where it had been before the crash. My account was back to around $360,000 even after 6 years of monthly withdrawals. By 2017, it crossed $500,000. I was pulling money out every single month, and the account was growing faster than I could spend it. That's when I realized something that nobody had ever explained to me in plain English. If your investments grow at 8 or 10% a year on average, and you're only pulling out 3 or 4%, the math works in your favor. The account just keeps growing. Not every year, some years it drops. But over time, the growth outpaces the withdrawals. Now, if you're serious about retiring comfortably without paying some advisor thousands of dollars to tell you what you could learn yourself, I put together something called the Quiet Millionaire Playbook. It covers the retirement accounts most people never hear about, which funds to pick, and which ones are quietly eating your money in fees, the Social Security timing decision that most people get wrong, and the real monthly math behind how ordinary people retire with more than they ever expected. The link is below this video. All right, let's keep going. There's actually a name for this. It's called the 4% rule. A financial planner named William Bengen figured it out in 1994. He looked at every 30-year period going back to the 1920s and found that if you withdrew 4% of your portfolio in the first year and adjusted for inflation after that, you wouldn't run out of money in any of those periods. Not during the Depression, not during the stagflation of the 70s, not during any of it. I didn't know any of this when I retired. I just picked $1,350 a month because it felt right. Turns out that was about 3.9% of $412,000. I accidentally followed the rule without knowing it existed. Now Frank moved his $380,000 into a money market fund in late 2008. Money market funds were paying maybe 1 or 2% at the time. Then interest rates dropped to basically zero and stayed there for years. By 2015, Frank's money was earning almost nothing. He was still pulling from it to live on, and it was shrinking every month. No growth to offset the withdrawals. By 2020, he was down to about $160,000. He's 80 now and genuinely worried about running out. The move that felt safe in 2008 turned out to be the most expensive decision he ever made. I want to be honest about what this felt like in real time, because looking at it now, it sounds easy. It was not easy. Watching $412,000 turn into $196,000 was physically painful. I had a knot in my stomach for months. I'd check the account and feel sick. June stopped wanting to talk about it. We'd watch the news and they'd say the market dropped another 400 points, and we'd just look at each other. There was one night in February 2009, the worst month, when I seriously considered calling Fidelity and moving everything to bonds. I picked up the phone. I held it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I put it down and went to bed. That 30 seconds was probably worth $250,000 to me over the next 17 years. The part that surprises people is the total amount I've withdrawn. 19 years at $1,350 a month. With some adjustments upward over the years for inflation, I've pulled out roughly $340,000 from that account. $340,000. And the account today has $446,000 in it. So I've taken out $340,000, and I still have $34,000 more than I started with. People hear that and they think there's a trick. There's no trick. The S&P 500 has averaged over 10% annually, with dividends reinvested over the last century. Even with one of the worst crashes in history happening the year after I retired, the long-term math still worked. My monthly budget is simple. The $1,350 from the 401k plus $1,680 from Social Security, plus June's Social Security of about $940, gives us roughly $3,970 a month. Our house has been paid off since 2004. Most months we spend around $2,600, and the rest just accumulates in checking. The thing I think about most is what would have happened if I'd done what Frank did. If I'd panicked and moved to a money market, my $196,000 would have slowly bled down to nothing. No growth to refill the bucket, just withdrawals draining it month after month. I'd probably be sitting here at 84 with $40,000 left, doing the math on how many months I had. Instead, I'm sitting here with more than I started with. The only difference between me and Frank is that I didn't make a phone call. I didn't do something smart. I avoided doing something dumb. Dale from the break room retired in 2005. He's 86 now. We still get coffee on Saturdays at this diner on Route 30 called the Oregon Dairy. I told him a few years ago that his advice in 1987 about the index fund was the most valuable thing anyone ever told me. He said he got it from a book he found at a yard sale. He doesn't even remember the title. 37 years of compounding came from a yard sale paperback and a guy who told me to pick one fund and forget about it. Kevin doesn't worry about me anymore. At Thanksgiving, he kept asking me questions about how it all worked, writing things down on a napkin. He's 41. He has a 401k through his firm. He told me he'd been putting money in a target date fund and paying somebody 0.8% a year to manage it. I told him about Dale's advice. Pick the index fund with the lowest fees and don't touch it. He looked at me and said, "That's it?" I said, "That's it." The hard part isn't knowing what to do. The hard part is not doing anything when everything falls apart. June made pie. We all watched football. Kevin kept looking at his phone, and I knew he was checking what his 401k was in. I let him figure it out.